So what do you think the number one call that we get at Baker Creek as far as an issue? Anybody take a guess? The number one? I just spoke a little bit about probably the number two, but what?
Japanese beetles.
Japanese beetles? Well, yeah. I mean, when they're in season, yeah, that's true. Japanese beetles are an issue. How many have problems with those beetles? Anybody? Okay, we got about half of you. What do you guys do for Japanese beetles?
Those bags.
The traps? Really, that's about the only thing you could do? Yes.
Well, we had an invasion last year, and they ate a 30-foot tall tree in a day.
Yeah.
So I had my guys, the professionals, come out and spray all my trees because I knew if it could eat a tree in a day, it would go for the garden and the lower plants later.
Right.
But I mean, that was like insane. My neighbor had the traps. He was emptying the traps twice a day and still had a beetle.
Yeah, so much for the theory that if you have healthy plants, insects don't bother them, right? Yeah, I hear that all the time, and I can tell you right now that, I mean, I'm probably going to get shot down for this, but it's just not true, okay? I can tell you it's not true because I've seen blister beetles do the same thing. I don't know if any of you experienced blister beetles. There's 3 or 4 varieties that we have, and I've seen them on the county road, and I said, uh-oh, here they come, and here, sure enough, in a week, they're in there eating all my greens and tomatoes, or eggplants. They just go at it. In the beginning, we just picking them, by hand. We got a bucket. The kids, they have something to do. They like picking them or stomping them and twisting them and watching them squirm. And then, after that gets old after a while. And I'll tell you, it gets so bad that you get to the spraying is the last resort. And I try to use organic sprays. In fact, I always use organic sprays. I've used a mixture of neem and the commercial variety of pyrethrin, and it's like, I think 1%, I believe, but it comes from a chrysanthemum flower, the pyrethrin oils, and so and the neem comes from the neem tree. I do that, and it's kind of like, they just kind of do circles around there, but it's a chemical, folks, it's a chemical, and I really try not to use it. It breaks down, yes, in the UV and the sunlight, but still I try not to use it. It's the thing of last result. It's kind of like the atomic bomb. You come in there, if you want to save your garden, you use it. But I try not to use those things. It's kind of like the guy turning on the sink, or the water on the sink running, flowing over, and to solve the problem, you're mopping up the water. That's not the problem. The problem is turn off the faucet. So try to find ways to maybe move your environment somewhere else, protect your plants perhaps. That would fall under environment by putting row covers over the plants to protect them from the onslaught of beetles that appear based on your calendar notes. Yeah, they come about right now. Okay, let's get out there and cover those things with a lightweight row cover. And so that has helped a lot. Just pre-planting, moving things, growing things maybe on the outskirts of the summer time a little bit, and just have a few resilient plants grow through the summer and try to survive through the summer. That's kind of what we've learned. Squash needs to be planted later on toward the fall instead of dead heat of the summer where all the squash bugs are just happily feasting on your food. And so, or earlier even. So squash is a warm or cool season vegetable, by the way? Is squash a warm or a cool season vegetable? Bam. No, it's a warm vegetable. As a general rule, this is the next question that people have. What should I plant and when? You can divide. The first thing you can do is divide a strategy where you take the plants that are leafy greens, like your kales, your lettuce, and then your root crops. Those are cool season vegetables. Onions are cool season vegetables. They enjoy a little cool weather. In fact, they even germinate in a little bit cooler soil. 75 degrees, maybe 80 degrees for some of those leafy greens and root crops. Beets usually germinate around 80. That's the optimum germination for beets, and they're also a cool-loving vegetable. But all your fruiting vegetables, which are what? Tomatoes, cucumbers, melons, squashes, eggplants. Those are warm season vegetables. They love heat. And so you divide your seed list into that. And those you kind of plant right after the spring festival. Okay? You should have them already started though, just to get them a head start. Now, if you got row covers, you can actually, and black plastic mulch, you can heat the soil up, put row covers, which also pulls that, or I should say traps that radiation of that sun in the soil, and you'll have maybe a head start by 3-4 weeks than your neighbor over there. And we do that a lot for farmers market. We get an early start with that, just warming the soil and adding a row cover, protects it from insects and also keeps that warm environment around those plants. And then we lift them off, when the bugs are just ready to dive in, but they're adult plants. By now, they can survive the onslaught for a few weeks from the bugs, and we can pick them maybe for a while, and it's just kind of get that going ahead of time before the bug season. So on the early part of the year and the later part of the summer is when you plant those warm vegetables. And some of those vegetables that are kind of impervious to bugs, like okra, they don't seem to bother them as much, although those beetles, Japanese beetles, tore into my okra last year. They eat just about anything if they're starving. But those are some of the ideas and strategies you can use to solve those problems. And then I promised that I would tell you a little bit about winter gardening. How many have done that? How many have grown through the year? And have you done that? Okay, good. And had a good winter crop. What kind of vegetables go through the winter? Warm or cool loving? Cool loving. So don't plant tomatoes just before, Thanksgiving. You want to use cool loving crops like your root crops and leafy greens. And what I do around here, usually around middle of November, the sun begins to only give us how many hours of light? Anybody know about? Okay, about 9 hours of light. At that point, somehow the plants they understand that and they start slowing down. It's not so much the cool weather, it's the light that slows the plants down. And so you go from there, middle of November around here. You can find out when those are. I can give you a website. You can look on there and you can type in your place where you live, and they'll tell you when that day is. And from that point on, you go back and say, I got some radishes here. Okay, it's 20 or about 30 days for maturity on those radishes. I just count back, okay? And that's when I generally begin to stop my planting of radishes. And I continue back, and if I want to do successions, I go back further, maybe a month or so beyond that, and I start planting my radishes about every 10 days in groups of 15 feet or so, until that day that first day would be the minimum up to November. And so I go all the way back there, and so I got radishes coming up at different times. And by the time that November 15 day comes, I got full-grown radishes. All right? And at that point, they just stop growing beyond that. And I'm harvesting carrots, radishes, spinach through the winter that way, as long as I can keep that warm row cover over the top. Perhaps in northern areas, a clear plastic over that, greenhouse plastic on top of that. And we did that up to January, February. We had vegetables, even lettuce. It would go down to like 3 or 4 degrees, and with the right amount of coverings, each covering usually drops your zone, or raises your zone up, by at least one zone. Okay, so you got 5, 6, 7. Basically, it brings that heat, conserves that heat, and you're eating salad greens all through the winter, and nice, sweet carrots, and no bugs. All right? No more blister beetles, no more Japanese beetles. You just go out there with your little knife after the frost is out, clear away the ice, and the plants have natural basically natural antifreeze in them. And you don't mess with them until it gets a little bit warmer and they thaw out a little bit. Some of them get a little bit frozen on the tips even with the cover, and you just harvest that way. And that's the way it works. And you can open your covers on a good day in the winter and then cover them about an hour before sunset. And so you're collecting the sun in the soil, and then you just shut that sun or that little canopy you've made, and you've got a little miniature greenhouse. So that's the way we harvest all through the year. And we've had winter CSAs with people selling or giving them farm boxes just full of different types of greens and roots that way, all through the winter. And they're all wondering, how did you do that? Do you have a greenhouse? No. I tell them the technique. It's real simple. So that's solving the problem of not having food in your garden in the winter. That's really the best time to have food. It's the best time. You're not fighting all these things, these pests that bother you.